Before we get into the heart of this evening's video essay address, I want to make sure that everyone checks to make certain that they're still subscribed to this channel. YouTube, of course, is doing their regular nonsense and deciding to remove subscriptions at their own indiscretion. And also, if you're not currently following me on Twitter, the link will be in the description. Now, that said, white supremacy is the enemy. Problem is, there's a lot of Negroes who seem to think that white supremacy is their buddy, and white supremacy's got them on the payroll. Chumps who depend on white supremacy and who see themselves as honorary, I put that in quotes, honorary members of the oppressor class. White supremacy has a good supply of dumb Negroes who think that they're so smart, mostly because they think white supremacy is playing footsie with them. This is largely a function of the white media. The white media mentions these clowns' names a couple of times, puts them on a cable show or two, gives them some phony praise, and since dumb Negroes are too stupid to realize when white power is playing them, it goes straight to their empty heads and they think they've figured it out. This is where people like Lee Daniels come from with that garbage that you've got to play the game. Play the game. Stupid, the game plays you. But he's not alone. A lot of these Negroes who white supremacy gives a couple of shekels to, they think that they've figured it out. This is where these black bootlicks you see in the white media come from. The roly-poly Martins, the sleaze Merritts, these guys play along with the white media's machinations. They pretend to be unhappy with the latest killing of a black person by some white supremacist, and then they try to talk us into going along with it. As Noam Chomsky said, it's the most sophisticated form of propaganda when something presents itself as opposition, when in reality, it's actually support. This is why we have to make sure that any black person who the white media is given a platform to gets called out and invalidated. Before the white media can try to bamboozle us, first they have to find some pliable, dishonorable sellout, and then they have to build that sellout up, give them some credentials, so the white media heaps praise on them and describes them in these ridiculously grandiose terms. Overnight, clowns you never heard of, people with dubious pasts and who have no real connections to the black empowerment movement, they're being held up as paragons of the black community. D. Ray McKeeson suddenly becomes a new black leader. The LGBT advocates behind Black Lives Matter suddenly become civil rights activists. Sleaze Merritt suddenly becomes an important civil rights attorney. And even though 99% of the people who the white media are presenting him to had no idea who this fool was just 6 months ago. But such is the power of the white media's megaphone. They simply declare their black bootlicks to be our spokesman, and then they watch as black people fall silent and follow the lead, or rather mislead, of these sellouts. Instead of black people speaking for ourselves, instead we sit back and we watch the pathetic show and we hope that these fools who the white media is putting on are going to speak for us. They never do. And for the longest time, black folks refuse to wise up to the scam. Black folks sit back thinking that these 2-bit BS artists are going to stick up for us, and that's never worked and it's never going to. The goal is not and should never be to have someone speaking for us who wins a debate on cable TV. And while debating is important, while it's crucial, while it's something that we must do and will continue to, we are not a professional debating society. The goal of black empowerment is not to argue. It's to create an economic, social, and political environment where we no longer have to argue. And you will not get around having to do the hard work of creating that environment yourself, because no one else is going to do it for you. Now, here's the good news. You won't have to be building that environment alone. There's plenty of other black people who are just as fed up as you are. The goal now is to aggregate those numbers and to make sure we get them on code. Thump people on the back of the head, or if necessary, slap them in the face whenever they're off code. That's why the white media trots out all these fakers, frauds, phonies, and fools. They have to keep up a relentless propaganda and disinformation campaign in order to disrupt our internal politics and to sow political dysfunction among us. That's the purpose that these black bootlicks who the white media puts on serve. We'll be over here doing things that are actually moving the ball toward the goal of black empowerment, and then you'll have some clown like Big Bird or Joy Reid or Malcolm Nance or So Full of It Nelson or Sleaze Merritt come along, and all of a sudden they're trying to throw shade on what we're doing. All of a sudden they're trying to attack it because that's their job. The white media builds them up as being the official spokespeople for Black America, but they never actually say the same things that Black America says. But family, we have to be starkly honest about how these clowns have gotten away with this for so long. We keep going for the okey doke. There's always an element of complicity with any group who's oppressed. There's always an element of complicity. Secretly, too many of us are desperate for acceptance, just like the black bootlicks are. We want that white supremacist acceptance just like the lowest of the low bedwencher bedbucker bootlick. Even when we claim to want liberation, what that really means is we just want white supremacy to be not quite so brutal towards us. If they could just let up on us just a little bit, that's what most of us qualify as liberation. That's what most of us think liberation is. Family, black empowerment is like pregnancy, and you can't be just a little pregnant. You also cannot be just a little free. Either you are totally free or you are totally oppressed. There is no middle of the road. And if you are not moving toward liberation and empowerment, then you are moving toward total subjugation, and the worst subjugation of all is death. And if the only time you can figure out that you're oppressed is when the white supremacists kill a black person, then band together to protect one of their own from punishment, then you don't deserve to be free. If the only time you figure out that you're under subjugation is when the white supremacists have carried out the latest outrage, that ain't good enough. If you hear a sleaze Merritt talking his usual line of crap and you still go for it anyway, then you deserve whatever you get. But what you will not get is black empowerment. What you will not get is liberation. And that's what some people are finding out right now. That's how white supremacy's con game works. That's how every con game works. You get the mark to con himself. You don't actually say that the mark is going to receive thus and so. You simply imply it, infer it, and let the mark's imagination fill in all those blanks. That way, when things go to hell because it was all a lie anyway, you can say, "Well, I never said that." No, but the con man does use every rhetorical trick they can to deliberately lead the mark to a false conclusion. This is why we have to put our boots on the throats of the Joy Reids and the Don Lemonades and the Deborah Mammy Chases. And we have to shout down and ignore the fools who are going to be on the sidelines calling themselves throwing shade, calling themselves throwing spitballs, or otherwise trying to cast aspersions on the mission that we're on. Of course, there are going to be enemy agents slithering amongst us, trying to figure out, well, how do we derail what they're doing? Oh, what we'll do is we'll say, well, y'all on the wrong track, or what's this code about? Well, what's this agenda about? You always got somebody who's trying to figure out how do they get us off track? How do they get us talking about something other than black empowerment? How do they get us on something other than attacking white supremacy? These people are not coming up trying to attack white supremacy. They're not leading the charge against the race soldiers. Instead, what they're doing is they're spending their time instead trying to attack our message. That's their mission, and that's how you know that you're dealing with an undercover agent for white supremacy. Of course, as I've always told you, when white supremacy is done with its tools, it always breaks its tools. That brings us to Trayvon Martin's family, who, after everything they knew about George Mad Dog Zimmerman, they still said that they didn't think that he was a racist or that he murdered their son because of racism. Now, the Martin family heard the same 911 recording that you and I heard. They heard Zimmerman grunting racist epithets as he stalked young Trayvon. And of course, hovering over the family was the spokescoon Benjamin Mushmouth Crump. It was his job to dissipate the righteous anger that had built, to pretend to speak to black outrage, but in reality, to get us to accept what was a clearly fixed up, rigged verdict. The powers that be had made up their minds that they wanted to send a message. They were going to make an example, and the example is that it was open season on black folks, and this was supposed to be just the beginning, and indeed it was. But it didn't go the way that they expected because there was a resurgent black media on the rise, starting the process of pushing back against the white media and against their black bootlick flunkies. Well, not surprisingly, in one of the most recent examples of a white supremacist race killing, the murder of Botham Jean, you had twice the mendacity, both Crump and Sleaze Merritt, being put on the case to help control the black community, to try to sanitize and otherwise legitimize what was a clear white supremacist con, letting a race killer all but walk, to make us feel better about a clearly anti-black murderer getting a slap on the wrist and being treated like she was the victim in open court. Not much outrage from Sleaze Merritt and Mushmouth Crump about that one. Oh, they gave the obligatory blink and you'll miss it mention of it. Oh, it's so confusing, so baffling. Ain't nothing confusing about it. Only thing baffling is how these clowns weren't called out long before now. The suck-ups and these would-be opportunists, they always wind up playing themselves. White power doesn't believe in giving you a pat on the head and then letting you go. That's not how white supremacy operates. Once you've shown white supremacy that you're willing to kowtow to their violence, you've painted a target on your own back. If you let white supremacy pat you on the head, then that means you've also let them make you into a marked man. White supremacy does not respect those who bow down to it. In fact, they will go from having just disdain for you to utter contempt. Once white supremacy sees that you'll let them get away with murder, it knows that you're weak. And as history has shown, corrupt individuals, and white supremacy is the epitome of corruption, they always get around to targeting the lackeys who bow down to them because your collaboration is recognized for what it is: cowardice and weakness. And since the white supremacists are always looking for easy victories, there's few victories easier than chewing up some cowardly whelp. What the Martin family is learning today is that George Zimmerman is a racist, whether they wanted to see it or not. And because they lack the character to call him out, and they lack the moral courage to actually take him on and take him down, what's happened now is this bastard is back to plague them. And this should stand as a lesson to us all. Some black folks are out here playing a game with people who are not playing with you. Now, while Zimmerman's nuisance suit is not going to go anywhere, the very fact that the Martin family, I'm sure, is going to be saying, well, we don't understand, and oh, how cruel of him. Yeah, he killed your son, but, you didn't quite realize what a bad guy you were dealing with. See, this is what happens when you have white supremacists waging a race war and you got black people here trying to act like, well, this is just a matter of a miscarriage of justice. No, when the white supremacists are killing black folks in the street, that's not an accident. And when the white supremacists, from the DAs to the media to the judges, all band together, they all walk in lockstep and they decide that they're going to close ranks against us, that's not a miscarriage of justice. That is the injustice system working exactly the way that they engineered it. We can't afford to let these anti-black psychotics off the hook. We can't afford to be trying to find ways to make excuses for them, or to downplay their crimes against us, or to pretend as if it's something other than what it is. We cannot have any tolerance for those who play along with it. We can't afford to play nice with the greatest evil the world's ever known. When some race killer murders a black person, the response must only be that it's racial and that we want capital punishment or life for the offenders. Nothing else is acceptable. Either the state puts them down like the rabid dogs they are, or they spend the rest of their lives in a cage. That's the demand, and nothing else. Ain't no hugging in court. There is no forgiveness. Let God handle the forgiveness part. We're here for justice. And justice is either a date with the lethal injection, or it is permanent lodging at the Gray Bar Motel. But what it is not is you get a few years and then you get to ask for parole. Understand something, family. The process of holding white supremacy accountable starts with you. I told you about the documentary The Lobby USA made by Al Jazeera and how it details the Israeli lobby's influence in U.S. politics, but it also shows how the Israelis themselves express some of the concerns they have about their own occasional inability to get things done and where the line is between effective and ineffective. They've gotten it down to a science. One of the things the Israeli lobby made excruciatingly clear is that they don't want a situation where they have to convince anyone to give billions of dollars to Israel. They don't like the idea that, well, we got to have some sort of arm wrestling contest with you and we got to go back and forth about it. That's one of the things that they said should not be an issue. They made it clear they're serious about what they want because they made it clear that they're tired of having to twist the arms of some defiant congressman or senator. Rather than go through all of that, they instead figure that they'll be better off just finding individuals who are already on their side and just installing them into office and let that be that. And this is something we've been talking about for a decade now, something that's on the to-do list for Black empowerment. The reason you don't see me talking about voting down ballot is because that's a trick bag. Voting for a mayor or a city council candidate is useless if we don't have people on the ballot who have pledged to get us our tangibles. Voting for some person at the local level who has not pledged to you your tangibles, who cannot form their lips to say Black empowerment, who refuses to acknowledge that those of us whose ancestry came out of slavery in America, that we have unique interests that are supposed to be for us, voting for somebody who refuses to do the things that we demand a politician do, it's no more intelligent to vote for them at the local level than it is to vote for them at the national level. It's not a matter of, well, it's okay if somebody at the local level doesn't pledge tangibles, but at the national level, oh, that's just too much. No, it's not okay, period. I don't give a damn if you're running for president or dog catcher. You can't form your mouth to say the words Black empowerment, you're not taking a pledge to a Black agenda, then I'm not going to be making any votes for you. Simple as that. And there is no getting around this. When we say take power into our own hands, this is what we mean. A great way to get our tangibles is to guarantee we get the lion's share of city and county contracts. That's just for starters. It's not the totality of it, but it's a damn good place to start. Make sure that you create bulwarks in the very place that you live. Take control of the economics and the politics of the areas in which you live. And how the tax dollars get distributed is one of the main things you need to be putting in your sights to have control over. As former slaves, we're hemorrhaging money, and one way we can help plug up some of these leaks is by getting our tax dollars to come back to us in the form of business contracts with the cities that we built. White power knows that there was always the chance that we might threaten to do something like this, so they took care to front load your city council and your county commission with their own sellouts and bootlicks. A bunch of white supremacist operatives. That's the bad news, but the good news is that in most cases, it would only require a few $1,000s to unseat the bastards. Most people don't even vote in local elections because they're demoralized, and that's perfectly understandable. They see the level of corruption that they're up against. They see that the bad guys are organized. And there's a white media out there legitimizing and justifying and otherwise trying to find a way to sanitize this corruption and to tell the people, instead of trying to encourage people that you need to take to these freaking streets and start ginning up your support, solidifying your base and taking these bastards on, instead what it does is it glorifies and makes celebrities out of these corrupt politicians. which on the one hand turns the very real life and death circumstances of policy making into entertainment. It's kind of happening on TV. You don't quite see it as happening in real life. It's just happening on TV. And on the other hand, getting you to accept that. They are teaching and indoctrinating and conditioning you to be apathetic about your own survival. And those who are apathetic about their survival don't survive. We as a people have resigned ourselves to living under corruption. And so long as the trash gets picked up occasionally, and so long as the police aren't gunning you down, well, not gunning you down this week, as long as they haven't gotten around to it yet, well, most black folks are content to hide in their homes and try to escape through television, Xbox, or sports. That is until your white employer or whomever, whatever government program you're getting your wherewithal from decides to cut you off. You can't survive under those circumstances where you're hiding your head in the sand until white supremacy decides to put the vice grip around your neck and make it where you can't anymore. You shouldn't wait till the situation gets that bad. Most of these local administrators for white supremacy, your local politicians who oppress you, they're only in office by a few thousand votes. They're hanging in there by their fingertips, truth be told, but what they also know is that nobody is really interested in taking them on. They are painfully aware that all it would take is just a few people in your neighborhood or just a couple of neighborhoods that you're familiar with to get on code, and you could easily galvanize enough votes to run the bastards out of office. It didn't take millions of dollars to unseat Anita Alvarez, and it didn't take millions of votes either. Just a few $1,000s and a few thousand votes was sufficient. And the same thing went for Tim McGinty and Angela Corey, who worked with George Zimmerman's lawyers to throw that case. The main thing that it took to get these bastards out of office was to keep their names and their crimes in the public mind, to make an issue out of getting them out of office, to make it where what they did was justification for getting them out, that was the reason. Well, what are you going to do? Well, I'm not going to be Anita Alvarez. Sold. Okay, we'll vote for you. Keep reminding people of what these animals did so that come election day, the voters would still be sufficiently motivated to show up to the polls and to vote them out. We're letting these bastards rule over us by default because the truth is we're not fighting them. Not really. We are not instituting a full court press. We're sitting back and seeing if D. Ray McKeeson's going to do it, or if Sleaze Merritt's going to do it, or if Roly-Poly Martin's going to do it, or if Malcolm Nance is going to do it. That's where we're sitting back. We're waiting to see if Big Bird and the rest of the clowns over at N-Cobra are going to do it. That's what we're really doing. Now, if it's a matter of money, then what we ought to do is be adults about the situation and put our heads together, stop making excuses about what you ain't got, find out how much we as a people need as a group, and how to get the money moving. Figure if there is no reason in the world why you should be acting like, well, I don't know how to contribute money to a politician. They're not asking for your life savings. They don't require that. You get 50 folks together and those 50 people put up $50 a piece, you got $2,500. And in most of these local races, unless you're living in some mega city, unless you're living in a large city, $2,500, that's usually about half the budget that one of these clowns who's in office now has for their reelection campaign. And with being black folks, you already know that we know how to stretch a dollar. We know how to do miracles with shoestring money. But the problem is we always use our money for trinkets and to goof off. We don't focus on power, we focus on trying to be distracted, diversions. That's where our funding goes to. Before we do anything, however, before we start trying to figure out how to put money into somebody's campaign coffers, the very first thing that we must do, we have to know, not think, not imply, but to know that whomever it is trying to get our vote is on board with the black agenda. If they are timid or self-conscious about saying this, then that means they don't need to be in office. It's a very simple litmus test. Is somebody actually on board with black empowerment? I don't know. Have they said it? If this person runs around and they're trying to sneak in the black-brown alliance stuff, that means they're off code. They're not with it. If every time you look up, they're constantly talking about advocacy for LGBT rights, but they're never talking about the rights of the former slaves, then that means that they're not on code. That means that they're not supposed to be having this vote. This is not somebody who is for a black agenda. If you're for a black agenda, then what happens is you're going to say it. And you're not going to be adding in all this other stuff. Black empowerment is not about coalitions, because the coalition always gets preferential treatment for everybody except for black folks. So we're not playing that game anymore. See, we've conditioned the world to think that our interests simply aren't serious because we've always been so bashful and embarrassed about speaking up for ourselves. We let everybody get comfortable with ignoring us because we haven't raised holy hell about our interest. We've been consistently inconsistent about pressing our demands. You want to know why the Israeli lobby gets preferential treatment? One of the main reasons is because they're not bashful about demanding it. People don't like it? Tough. They're not apologizing for it, and they're not going to stop pushing for it. They don't worry or care about how it looks, or about how other people feel about it. People get caught up in their feelings all the time. Far as they're concerned, if they think that their interests require extraordinary resources, then it is what it is. The fact that they want it justifies them having it. We have been deprived, ripped off and robbed for 500 years, more than anyone else on the planet, yet we just sit back and allow everyone else to tell us that our needs and our interests are no more important than anyone else. In fact, our interests are less important because we are to blame for everything. From the economy to whatever it is, it's always black people's fault. Those former slaves, it's always their fault. They don't own anything, don't control anything, don't run anything, but whatever it is, it's their fault. Hey, it rained in Cincinnati today. I wonder how those black people did that. That's the narrative that white supremacy through their white media has pushed and promoted for hundreds of years. And rather than push back against these lies, we instead let the lies stand. And this, of course, has emboldened our enemies, who then come back and instead of telling us that we're less deserving of resources, now they're telling us that we're a drain on resources. Forget about that we're less deserving of resources. After we show cowardice in the face of this aggression, they come back and say, you know what, you Negroes, you owe America. You owe America something for everything this country has done for you. See how quickly that escalates? You think if you just don't say anything, then this white supremacist aggression will stop, and instead, we only help it to increase because we're not pushing back. They tell us that we should forget about slavery, forget about Jim Crow, forget about the systematic destruction of the black enclaves of wealth following Reconstruction. Forget about the black codes, forget about Jim Crow, segregation, forget about mass incarceration and the wholesale shutting out of black people from the economy of this country. Things that no one else has been subjected to. These other groups, they have not been subjected to any one of those things. We've been subjected to all of them. And yet we're supposed to forget about it. They would never say that to anybody else, but they say that to us because we've allowed them to get comfortable with talking to us any old kind of way. That's why crushing Kamala Harris was so important. And it was important that she understand the reason why it happened. When she sat there deciding that she was going to lock up black folks and lie about it, she decided that she would sign the expiration date for her own political career right there. And when she decided to throw her jughead crown in the ring to seek political office outside of the California political machine, that's it. She was all ours. Now we could actually influence whether or not she won office. In California, it may be a matter of black people are a non-entity on the political scene there, but out here in the rest of the 48, especially in these southern states, the primary states where Democratic presidential contenders are made or broken, it is our vote that matters. And no amount of white political support from Silicon Valley or the San Francisco political machine, no amount of string pulling by low down Willie Brown is going to save you if the black vote nationally is on code against you. And we were on code against Kamala Harris. We did something that nobody thought that we could do. And we crushed her with ease because that's the power of we. And all the while, we got these turncoats slithering amongst us, justifying the anti-black racism and trying to make it seem noble to let white supremacy get away with killing us and oppressing us and subjecting us to all sorts of economic, political, and social violence. Well, whether or not this satanic circus continues, that depends entirely on us. This is why you don't see me focusing on trying to get attention from the white media. This fight's not going to be won on the front page of the New York Times or on the opening segment on CNN's NewsHour. It will be won street by street in the black community. The white media is not going to spread the word about black empowerment. They will, however, tell the nation to fear it and that these people have to be stopped and that they're Russian bots and they're this, that, and the third. Pushing black empowerment, spreading the word about it, that's our job. Educating people about the need for the black agenda and the necessity to sign on to it, that's our job. See, you're not going to outsource your community outreach to the white media. The focus must be on getting as many black people as is practical on board with the agenda to get and secure our tangibles. Most black people are timid because they've been conditioned to be that way. They will deny what we need until they see a black person with the guts to stand up for it and speak out for it. The same black people who were totally dismissive of reparations 5 years ago are suddenly in favor of it. We keep wanting someone else to take the arrows for us. We keep wanting someone else to do the hard work when that's our task. If punishing white supremacists is one of your principles, then you have to stand on it. If securing our tangibles is one of your principles, then you have to stand on it. If safeguarding and promoting our interests is one of your principles, then you got to stand on it and stand up for it. You saw just last week that it was just a couple of black folks who confronted one of the white media's bedwenches, Deborah Mammy Chase, face to face, and just look at how much attention and support that single action has garnered. My video essay about it has gotten over 67,000 views alone, and this in only a little over a week. What does that tell you? What it means is we have more support than we know, but we have to accept the fact that part of our resurrection and rise is going to require us to put a spine back into a largely spineless people, to teach them to stand up to white supremacy instead of accepting it in silence, to confront those who have wronged us instead of always just complaining about it and waiting to see if maybe somebody will say something about it on cable news. Part of white supremacy's MO is to subject the black population of this planet to a daily breaking process, to remind you and to re-remind you every day that you are a subjugated people. Well, it's way past time we made up our minds to do the same to them, to subject the white supremacists to a daily breaking process. And once you have sufficient resources, it's not going to be a Herculean effort to do so. That's one of the things that people like Maya Angelou never understood. You see, for the white supremacists, when they amassed all the resources that they stole from us, it was no longer a bother or an annoyance or even just a chore for them to have to hold us down. It became easy because they had so much resources they could literally monetize it. That being the case, it stops being any sort of annoyance, and instead it becomes a profitable joy for them. It's something that they look forward to. They are eagerly looking forward to oppressing us because they amass so much resources that it's not a problem for them. That's something that some of these go along to get along Negroes never understood and would never understand. And we're not going to waste time trying to inform and educate the hopeless. We're going to be pushing and promoting our interests. And as an astute brother said, we don't need leaders, we need teams. Black empowerment starts with you. Jason Black explained that having a code of conduct means that we know what is in our interest and we behave accordingly. That's a code of conduct. Now you understand what our interests are, and you understand the discipline necessary to achieve it. You start right where you are. Most black folks are just milling around like sheep. There's nobody who's trying to get them on code. So when they see one black person who's got their act halfway together, they're going to gravitate toward that simply because it's the only thing going. Understand that. Do your homework. Find out how many dollars and how many votes you need in order to start seizing the levers of power where you live and be an unapologetic spokesperson for black empowerment. Be the example. Be the example of the ideology. Don't tell people get behind me. You let them know you're getting behind this ideology. See, it makes no sense to vote down ballot unless you have an acceptable candidate who is running down ballot. And you won't be able to outsource that responsibility to the Democrats. Power is not given, it's taken. And the first power is the ability to choose what you want, not to be forced to have to make a false decision between white supremacist candidate A and white supremacist candidate B. Instead, your goal is to find someone who has pledged themselves to your tangibles. That way, you're not making a choice, you're simply acting. That's the point. As long as you're showing up at the ballot box and you're trying to vote down ballot and you're trying to choose from this rogues gallery put in front of you by white supremacy, that means you're reacting. You become proactive when you say, you know what, to hell with this ballot coming to make a choice on election day. I'm going to make my choice well before election day. I'm going to decide who's on the ballot, not at the ballot box, but before the vote even takes place. I'm going to put people on that ballot. Hell, I'll do it my damn self. That's when you'll know that you're serious about your power. When you've decided to stop being apathetic and wait to see what comes your way and you start making things happen. When people see individuals like you talking that black empowerment talk, putting the black agenda on the ballot and putting it into the political discourse in their own hometowns, getting into office, it will become habit forming when they see that. Now, it's not going to happen overnight because I know there's some black folks who have made a religion out of being completely unrealistic. But the change is not going to happen overnight because black empowerment didn't get to where it is now overnight. But when we are consistently consistent again, we'll start making headway. And it's going to happen sooner than people think. We will see black people pushing and promoting our definition of who we are and what we're about. And that we are going to punish those who try to figure out how to put white supremacy's twisted, handcrafted definition, false definition onto us. You can't beat white supremacy by being nice to it. That's what the Martin family's finding out. Playing along with the bad guys won't get them to leave you alone. Trying to find a way to recognize the humanity of the white supremacists, which is to give them something that they don't have. White supremacy and humanity are contradictions in terms. The white supremacist has no humanity. That's why the white supremacist cannot recognize your humanity. He can't recognize something that he has no conception of. So you're sitting here ascribing values to him and qualities to the white supremacist that the white supremacist doesn't have. The reason the white supremacists can get resources is because we have not made it a priority to strangle them for resources. And they see this lack of resolve on our part, and it is comfort for them because we've sent them the signal that we're not actually going to challenge them. Well, enough of that. They're scared that we'll start correcting black culture, repairing the damage that they've done to it, and get us back on the path of fighting white supremacy instead of trying to find a way to duck and dodge white supremacy and to appease the white supremacists. They're terrified of the day that we stop trying to appease them and start fighting them. We've shown the white media that they don't choose who speaks for us as a people, that they will not choose who speaks for us in national politics. We must also prove that we're dedicated to not letting white supremacy plant their bootlicks among us to speak for us at the individual level either. Black folks who decide that it's okay to play along with well, I'll say that this white supremacist, I don't think they're racist because, well, I can't do nothing about who they kill, so I'm going to go ahead and try to get this bag. And I got this lawyer over here telling me this is the smart play. And I got this white media patting me on the head for being so forgiving. You know what? I like getting a pat on the head, and I kind of feel like I'm a somebody now. And well, it's all about me now. Black folks trying to do ego stroking to try to cover up for the fact that they're too cowardly and too lacking in morality to fight white supremacy. That day is done. We have to make it where when folks are getting off code and exposing us to danger and they're trying to paint a target on our backs, that we're not just going to sit there and let that be some sort of victimless crime. You want to show people that it is not okay to appease white supremacy? That starts with you. When the black folks who are trying to make excuses for bowing down and bending over for white supremacy, when they understand that they're going to receive maximum resistance from those of us who are serious about black empowerment, that's when these scumbags are going to start backing down because they ain't got the guts to stand up to white supremacy. That means that they're going to be standing down when we show that we're serious. But that starts with you. So you probably noticed that I haven't said a whole lot in terms of sympathy for the Martin family. Not sure how I can be sympathetic for them. They were the ones who said that George Zimmerman was not a racist. So that being the case, I can't really look at his latest act against them as being an act of racism. Maybe he's got some sort of bipolar disorder. Or perhaps George Zimmerman is merely misunderstood. But that's not the spin the white media is going to put on it. They're going to put the spin on it that George Zimmerman's in the right. Why? Well, because he serves white supremacy's interests. So let the Martin family stand as a lesson to everyone that when you play footsie with white supremacy is not going to come back to you and say, oh, maybe you're all right. Instead, white supremacy is going to look, recognize your cowardice for the cravenly, despicable kowtowing that it is, and then they're going to punish you for it because that's what white supremacy does to its tools.